What if I told you the secret to success isn't found in louder voices, stronger opinions, or more clever words, but in silence? What if the power that separates the average from the exceptional has less to do with what you say and everything to do with what you withhold? Yes, silence. Controlled, disciplined, intentional silence. The kind of silence that listens deeply, that observes wisely, that thinks before it acts. The kind that builds mental power like a dynamo and reveals to the world a mind not easily disturbed. You live in a noisy world, a world of talking heads and endless scrolling, a world that rewards speed over stillness and noise over depth. But let me tell you something, greatness is never built in chaos. It is built in the quiet chambers of the mind, where self-control, observation, and discipline reside. The most successful people I've studied, the most brilliant minds I've interviewed, do not speak to be heard. They speak to deliver value. And they speak only after they have listened, pondered, and prepared. They know the true gold is not in shouting opinions, but in gathering wisdom. Not in dominating conversations, but in mastering themselves. Silence is not weakness. Silence is power under control. And I say to you now, if you want to rise quickly, if you want to develop mental sharpness, emotional mastery, and strategic dominance in any field, start with this one habit. Learn to talk less and listen more. Not because you have nothing to say, but because your mind becomes sharper when your mouth pauses. Because silence gives space for thought to mature. Because words once spoken cannot be retrieved, and the wise man understands that restraint is a rare and priceless strength. The one who listens learns. The one who listens adapts. The one who listens understands the terrain while others get lost in their noise. You must become a student of silence because in silence the mind regains its authority. In silence you find clarity. In silence, you discover the truth others miss. Most people fear silence. They feel compelled to fill every gap with noise. But that compulsion is a trap. For in that noise, they reveal too much. They show their insecurities. They expose their plans. They blur their edge. While the wise man listens, watches, calculates, quietly gathering the data, reading the room, learning where to strike with precision. You must understand, power flows toward the man who does not need to prove himself, the man who commands attention without demanding it, the man who sits in silence not because he's lost, but because he's watching everything. Let me give you a principle. The more you speak, the more predictable you become. The more predictable you are, the less power you hold. But when you speak less and think more, you build intrigue, you build depth, and you maintain control. Control is the currency of every negotiation, every leadership dynamic, every room where influence is exchanged. And you do not gain control by dominating the conversation. You gain it by mastering yourself. Talk less, observe more. Most people reveal their mindset in the first 5 minutes. If you are patient, if you are quiet, they will tell you exactly how they think, what they fear, what they want, what drives them. But if you are too eager to speak, you miss it all. This is the reason why the greats rise above their peers. Not because they are always the loudest voice, but because they are the calmest presence. They know what to say, but more importantly, they know when to say nothing. There is power in strategic silence. When you withhold your opinion until it's fully formed, when you let others reveal their cards, when you maintain your composure while others unravel, that's when you gain the upper hand. In business, in relationships, in leadership, silence gives you leverage because it allows you to see the whole board. It allows you to process, reflect, and respond rather than react. And response is always stronger than reaction. Let's speak about listening. Most people don't listen. They wait to talk. They hear words, but they miss meaning. They prepare rebuttals instead of seeking understanding, and in doing so, they lose the opportunity to influence. True listening is an act of intelligence, it says. I care enough to understand, it says. I am present enough to receive the whole picture. It builds trust. It builds insight. It gives you tools the talker will never acquire. And the more you listen, the better you speak when the time is right. Because now your words are grounded in reality, not assumption, in empathy, not ego, in timing, not noise. There is another reason to embrace silence. In silence, you gain access to your own mind. How can you think deeply when you're always talking? How can you develop original ideas when you're always reacting? How can you hear your own convictions when the noise of the world drowns your inner voice? Solitude, reflection, quiet. These are not luxuries. They are necessities for every man who seeks to lead, to build, to master his craft. Your greatest ideas will not come in crowds. They will come when you've learned to sit still, to go inward, to listen to your intuition. Let me remind you, your intuition is not random. It is the result of every experience, every lesson, every pattern your subconscious has stored over years of learning, and it speaks clearest in silence. Make time for silence. Protect it. Practice it. Walk without music. Sit without distraction. Think without interruption. These are not passive moments. They are training, mental training, emotional training, strategic training. The more you master silence, the more clearly you will see what others miss. You will hear the hesitation behind the words. You will sense the tension beneath the surface. You will notice the shift in energy that precedes every important moment because you have trained yourself to notice. Silence also protects your energy. When you speak unnecessarily, when you engage in gossip, when you argue just to be right, you drain your mind, you scatter your attention, you leak power. But when you hold your peace, when you choose your words, when you speak with restraint, you preserve your force. And that force, built up over days, weeks, months, that's the fire you need when the moment calls for power. You're not exhausted from constant talking. You're sharp. You're precise. You're ready. Let's talk about speed. The man who listens more and speaks less moves faster. Why? Because he doesn't waste time correcting errors made in haste. He doesn't waste energy managing the chaos his own words created. He acts with clarity, with confidence, with alignment. And in doing so, he accelerates. You do not need to move frantically to move fast. Speed comes from clarity. Clarity comes from silence. Now, if you want to integrate this way of being, don't start by removing all speech. Start by upgrading your awareness. Before you speak, pause. Ask, is this necessary? Is it true? Does it serve the moment? Does it build or does it dilute? Before you respond, listen. Ask, what is really being said here? What is beneath the words? What is the intent? What is the opportunity? Before you engage, consider. Ask, is this where I want to invest my energy? Is this aligned with my values, my mission, my state of mind? These micro pauses, these moments of reflection, they build a habit of wisdom. They program your subconscious to operate not in reaction, but in clarity. And when clarity becomes your baseline, you become magnetic. People notice. They respect the one who is not easily swayed. They listen when you speak because you don't speak just to speak. They follow your lead because you carry yourself with the weight of intentionality. This is how silence becomes gold, not because it fills space, but because it sharpens your essence. You become rare. In a world addicted to noise, you become the one who holds his peace. In a world chasing attention, you become the one who commands it. In a world that rushes to talk, you become the one who waits to speak with impact. This is not about hiding, this is about harnessing. You are not retreating. You are rising with power no one sees until it moves. With clarity no one expects until you act. With wisdom that wasn't shouted but developed in silence. There is a depth of personal power that can only be accessed when you cease the need to be constantly heard and begin the discipline of hearing everything around you, without reacting, without needing to inject your opinion. without needing validation. And when you master this, when you learn to listen with presence, observe with clarity, and hold your voice with precision, you will begin to see how much faster progress comes. You see, most people talk themselves out of opportunities. They talk themselves into conflict. They talk past insight. They speak to fill gaps of silence they have never learned to sit with. But silence is where the real leverage is cultivated, because silence slows the external world down enough for you to hear the inner wisdom that others miss. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat in silence long enough to hear your own thoughts without distortion, without noise, without another voice trying to shape your mind? Most never do. But the man who wants to rise quickly, the one who wants to dominate his lane, master his craft, and make an impact that endures, he learns to find stillness, not just in solitude, but within himself. He becomes unmoved by chaos, unshaken by pressure, because he has trained his mind to settle, to wait, to listen, to see before reacting. And this man, he succeeds fast. Because while others are scrambling, guessing, hoping, he is observing, calculating, positioning, preparing. He speaks when it's time to speak. Not before, not because of ego, not to be heard, but because there's something precise to say, something that shifts the room, something that matters. Now I want to speak to you about strategic restraint. You don't need to say everything you know. You don't need to share every thought you have. You don't need to prove your intelligence by how often you speak. In fact, the more you withhold, the more powerful your presence becomes. Because mystery creates interest, depth creates trust, stillness creates gravity. And gravity attracts. When you speak less, you become more potent. Every word you say begins to carry more weight. Because people understand you're not speaking to fill air, you're speaking to move ideas, to lead minds, to shift direction. And when that's how you speak, people lean in, they respect you. They listen. Let others chase applause. You chase alignment. Let others dominate rooms. You command attention by being selective, not loud, because when you talk less, people wonder more, and curiosity is power. But understand, this is not about silence for its own sake. It's about intentionality. When your silence is rooted in clarity, your actions become efficient. Your thoughts become ordered. Your emotions become stable. And your results, they accelerate. Let's talk about emotional mastery. The man who is quick to speak is usually quick to anger, quick to defend, quick to unravel. But the man who is silent has room between stimulus and response. He thinks before reacting. He checks his emotions before expressing. He asks, what is the wisest response here? What serves the moment? What builds the future? That pause, that breath, that microsecond of silence, it's where leadership is forged. It's where wisdom intervenes. It's where poor decisions are prevented and powerful ones are birthed. Train yourself to respond from strength, not from emotion. Don't let someone else's words dictate your state. Don't let offense pull you into reaction. Your peace is your power. Guard it with silence. And when you do speak, let your words be backed by intent. Let them echo with clarity. Let them mean something. Here is a truth very few understand. Silence reveals the real players. Because in silence, you can't fake confidence, you can't distract with words, you can't dominate with volume. You are left with presence, energy, awareness. And those who have done the inner work, they shine in silence. While others squirm, the composed man watches. While others ramble, the wise man waits. While others seek to impress, the grounded man simply is. This presence, it's magnetic. It doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it draws the room toward it, and it comes only from mastering the art of stillness. This stillness, this internal silence is also where creativity emerges. If you are always consuming, always reacting, always talking, you leave no space for new insight to arrive, but in silence ideas come, solutions reveal themselves, Vision becomes clearer. Silence is the soil of genius. Make it a habit to withdraw from noise, to go on long walks without devices, to sit with your own thoughts, uncomfortable though they may be. Because those who are brave enough to face their internal noise are the ones who become clear enough to change the external world. Now let's talk about speed again. The man who listens more, speaks less, and acts from clarity doesn't waste energy backtracking. He doesn't apologize for words spoken in haste. He doesn't burn bridges because he couldn't control his mouth. He moves with calm. He moves with poise. He moves with power. And that movement, it compounds because clarity saves time. Restraint protects relationships. Stillness strengthens decisions. Discipline eliminates detours. You move faster not by doing more, but by doing less from a place of certainty, and that certainty, it is born in silence. But what about leadership? What about influence? Many think leadership is about commanding rooms, dominating conversations, giving the best speeches, and while communication matters, what matters more is presence. The quiet confidence that you know who you are, that you are clear on what you believe, that you are not easily rattled. People don't follow noise, they follow clarity, and clarity lives in silence. The greatest leaders are the ones who speak with intent, not impulse, who listen more than they lecture, who ask questions instead of making assumptions, who reflect before they act. And when they do act, they do so with force, because the time they spent in silence was not passive, it was preparation. Make silence your classroom. Every room you enter, listen first. Every decision you make, think deeply. Every response you give, pause. Because power is not just the ability to move fast, it's the ability to move right. And that precision, it is born in stillness. Let me leave you with a discipline. One that will challenge you, humble you, and strengthen you. Practice silence intentionally. Each day, carve out time where you speak nothing. Not because there's nothing to say, but because you're learning to hear again. Hear your thoughts, hear your emotions, hear your inner truth. Then go out into the world and watch how your restraint sharpens your perception. Watch how people begin to lean in when you do speak. Watch how clarity replaces confusion, how strength replaces anxiety, how alignment replaces chaos. This is not the path of the average man, but you are not here to be average. You are here to rise. And to rise fast, you must listen more, talk less, succeed with speed and with purpose. There comes a point in the man's development when he no longer seeks to prove himself, but to prepare himself. He no longer rushes to speak, but disciplines his mind to listen, to absorb, to think, to calculate. This man becomes dangerous, not because of the volume of his voice, but because of the weight of his presence. And it is in silence that such presence is born. Silence is not an absence of power. It is the chamber in which power is refined. It is the forge in which mental discipline is molded, where emotional stability is tempered, and where vision is purified from noise. In a world obsessed with expression, those who master silence gain the advantage that noise cannot offer, clarity of action. And the man who acts with clarity never has to beg for results. He does not need to convince, because his consistency speaks for him. He does not need to argue, because his actions already prove him right. He does not need to rush, because he has studied the terrain in quiet and moves with deliberate strength. I want you to imagine walking into every room, every conversation, every opportunity with complete inner calm, not because you are the loudest voice, but because you are the most prepared. You've observed, you've processed, you've waited, and when you finally speak, it's not to take up space, it's to define it. That is what silence gives you. It gives you command, not through force, but through alignment. And this alignment becomes the gateway to speed. You will accomplish in 1 year what others scramble to do in 10, not because you hustle harder, but because you waste less drama, less confusion, less regret over words you should not have said, less detours taken because of unclear thinking. Most men are busy trying to be seen. Few are busy becoming unshakable. And that's what I urge you to do. Become unshakable, not by speaking louder, but by building yourself in silence so thoroughly that your results speak for you. Think of it. How much time and energy do you lose every week correcting misunderstandings caused by careless speech? How many relationships strained? How many opportunities missed because you rushed to speak instead of choosing to listen? A man of silence is a man of intention. He does not scatter his thoughts. He does not dilute his influence. He conserves his energy and focuses it only where it matters. He may not always be the first to speak, but when he does, the room adjusts to his tone. There's another reason why silence is golden. It is the foundation of personal peace. You cannot build greatness on a mind that is constantly disturbed. You cannot make wise decisions when your thoughts are entangled in petty conversations, digital noise, or the emotional chaos of others. And this is what silence trains you to do, to disengage from what doesn't serve, to protect the sanctity of your inner space, and to elevate your thinking above the noise. Silence becomes your sanctuary. You begin to notice when your mind is overloaded. You begin to feel when your emotions are pulling you out of alignment. And instead of reacting, you return to quiet, to stillness, to presence. That presence sharpens your intuition. You begin to trust your instincts, not because they are random feelings, but because they are rooted in a clear, trained, and observant mind. Your decisions improve. Your relationships deepen. Your direction becomes unwavering. Let me remind you, true leaders don't make noise. They create structure. They don't chase attention. They move with such conviction that attention is drawn to them. And what separates them is not their ability to talk, but their ability to see, to read the room, to understand timing, to sense energy, to interpret silence, not as absence, but as information. When you become silent, you start to see patterns others miss. You detect subtle shifts in tone, posture, and attitude. You hear what isn't said. You notice what is avoided. And from that awareness, you gain strategic leverage in every area of your life. Let me give you a challenge. Go one day this week where you speak only when necessary, not in withdrawal, not in weakness, but as a practice. Practice watching. Practice listening. Practice waiting. Then journal what you learned. Not just about others, but about yourself. You will be surprised how much noise you've been tolerating. How much of your energy has been leaked through unnecessary words, unconscious reactions, and wasted conversations. You realize how powerful you can become when you guard your presence and wield your words like a master craftsman, precisely, intentionally, sparingly. Silence also strengthens your resolve. When you stop talking about every idea, every plan, every vision, you give your mind the space to incubate it. You let it grow inside of you, protected from criticism, from outside energy, from distraction. You no longer seek approval. You no longer dilute your fire by sharing it too early. You let it burn quietly until it's ready to be released through action, not talk. Talk less, execute more. That's how the wise man rises. He lets his success make the noise. He lets his results speak. He lets his consistency prove the point. And in doing so, he builds credibility that words alone could never earn. Now, to be clear, silence is not passivity. It is preparation. It is observation. It is the fertile ground from which decisive action grows. It does not mean inaction. It means every action is preceded by deep clarity. So when you move like a man who has thought it through. You move with conviction. You move without hesitation. Because the decision wasn't made in the moment, it was forged in the silence before it. This is how the fastest men move. Quietly, patiently, then powerfully. And this is what makes silence the master key to speed. It removes the noise. It clears the fog. It aligns the internal with the external. And when you are aligned, you are fast. Now listen carefully to these final truths. If you want to move faster, slow your mind. If you want to speak with impact, speak less. If you want to be respected, listen more. If you want to lead, master your presence. And if you want to succeed, not just eventually, but decisively, then stop filling your life with noise. Fill it with power, with clarity, with thought, with vision. And let silence be your ally. Let it teach you what speed cannot. Let it build your character before the world sees your results. Let it shape your discipline before you chase your goals. Let it make you magnetic, not because of how loud you are, but because of how precise you've become. Success is not about being heard, it's about being trusted. And trust is built in stillness. So walk out of here not just inspired, but calibrated. Talk less, listen more, succeed fast. Your silence is your gold. Use it well.